when they announced that Disney had bought Lucasfilm around Halloween, which was October 30th, it was announced. And, we didn't know who the director was going to be, and then they announced J.J. Abrams, and it all came out. It was all very, very exciting, and I hope people are happy. It seems like, because in Hollywood, remember, kids, it's not important if it's of high quality, only if it makes money.
So, I never had strong feelings towards Rey's character, simply because she never inspired anything in me. Every time she shows up on screen, I just stare at the blank nothingness. Don't get me wrong though, I do like making fun of her, but I don't particularly find the idea of watching her that appealing. A lot of people feel the same way, just complete indifference towards the character who was, the main figurehead of the multi-billion-dollar franchise for quite some time. And there are the rest of the people. Yeah, they don't really like her that much either. Therefore, it has always been interesting to me how this single character managed to inspire such deep dislike in so many people. How is it that people resonate with Kylo Ren more than protagonist herself? Or how is Anakin considered to be more sympathetic than our not-so-pure-blooded heroine?
Besides her longing for her family and parents, what would you say is another weakness for Rey?
I do not think that is a weakness.
And yeah, we could always say that she's a Mary Sue and move on with our day, but I feel like at this point the term Mary Sue just became another way to say yes, she sucks in order to cut it short. But to me the argumentation is not enough, because I feel like the reasoning behind Rey's character's failure goes way beyond the character just being flawless and perfect. But before I start, I know there are going to be a ton of you saying, well, the movie sucked, so of course the characters have to suck too, so yeah, no. I mean, people do like Kylo Ren, or even Finn. I mean, at least they find them tolerable differently from Rey, so yeah, I disagree with you on that one.
And the women! The women! We will always treat with respect!
So, it's 2012, and Disney brought Star Wars, and everyone is excited, and everyone is waiting for the new movies to come out and blow us all away, and oh, blow us away they did indeed. So here comes in our new protagonist, Kira, a loner, hothead, gearhead, badass, as described by the screenwriter Michael Arndt. Aside from the fact that she was a female writer's idea for her story was somewhat unpolished, which obviously includes her name, which was not even suggested by J.J. Abrams until the official filming of the movie started in Abu Dhabi. Well, that's a great sign if I've ever seen one.
Kathy Kennedy, when we first talked about it, she said, we're talking about the idea of having a female Jedi. And I'd written some shows, Felicity and Alias, that had female characters at the center, and the idea of a female Jedi.
The biggest argument the writers had for making Rey a female was that they thought that having more representation was a very important concept for such a huge franchise, which is a good enough reason. Even though we all know very well just how much these same creators care about the representation, unless it's about saber-wielding badass women from their fantasies. Even though their reasoning behind the idea was correct, the execution at least was, very flawed, since Rey's character falls perfectly in the category of something I'd like to call a feminist icon syndrome. This is a universally acclaimed condition, and not at all made by me, of a character preferably female written by the male writers who have no grasp of femininity and are only able to write the so-called strong female characters by attributing the masculine features to them. In short, they scrap the character from all their definitive female qualities except of their physicality, obviously, and replace them with features that are more present in male leads in media, such as physical strength, anger issues, dominance, emotional suppression. Imagine a kid named Jim, and he's 5, and his teacher instructed him to draw a strong female, but Jim had no idea how a strong female might look. Therefore, he drew a muscular man with a wig instead. And if these above-mentioned traits are part one's character, there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that most of these strong female characters embody these characteristics simply because their writers only knew how to write strong male characters, and that's what they do, except this time they look like Daisy Ridley. This unintentionally creates a narrative that the only way a woman can be considered strong is for her to acquire qualities mostly attributed to males. It's funny how something that is so badly intentioned to be progressive ends up to be the most sexist concept of them all. And Rey's character suffers for that. She is written with this I need no man bossy attitude that makes it hard for both women and men to find her likable. People can't relate to her because writers have a hard time balancing her femininity with the fact that she's supposed to be this kick-ass badass girl boss, and thus create a character who's this uncanny valley between the two and falls completely out of touch with how actual humans function. The most ironic part of all this is that Star Wars was a pioneer of writing a perfect strong female back in the 70s and early 80s. Leia Organa's character, at least in my opinion, still remains as one of the most enjoyable and lovable badass women out there. Even though we never see her on the battlefield, she perfectly captures the essence of actual feminism. The writers don't strip her from all of her soft qualities in order to make her tough. They find a way to build upon them. And yes, I completely refuse to admit the existence of the objectifying golden bikini thing. Thank you very much. The sequel trilogy's biggest mistake was to assume that Star Wars was in need of one single super strong female character. Women in Star Wars universe didn't need to be rewritten, they just needed to be written more about.
Luke's, in scuba gear with Daisy's character. What's her name? Rey.
It is a well-known notion that the first movies in both trilogies are quite similar, and so are their protagonists. They're both whiny, childish, naive, longing for a greater world. I mean, neither of them are written to be the most complex characters, and additionally, it's not like Star Wars ever had a reputation for ever having the most three-dimensional protagonists. Therefore, Luke Skywalker, introduced in 1977's Star Wars, is not really an epitome of character writing either, at least not at first. But we do like him. On the other hand, we do not like Rey that much. So, does that make us sexist, or what?
The Mary Sue thing I was just confused by. Like, the Mary Sue thing I just didn't get because it wasn't true. The Mary Sue thing in itself is sexist. Yeah. Because it's a name of a woman. And everyone was saying that Luke had exactly the same thing. I think Rey is incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah, this bugged me for the longest time. People do find an explanation for that, which is an above-mentioned Rey is flawless and Luke is not argument. They say that differently from Luke, Rey never loses a single battle, which is kind of false. She does lose a battle at the end of The Last Jedi, well, kinda. I mean, she doesn't win it at least. So, what makes Luke so likable that Rey does not embody? The fact that writers made Rey's character's story so similar to Luke's makes it seem like an even bigger paradox. And then it hit me. The problem is not that she never loses a battle, the problem is that she never has to suffer for the consequences of that loss. Even though at the end of the movie both her and Kylo equally lose and get knocked out, it's only Kylo who wakes up later defeated in the middle of destruction while Rey's fine. She's fine. She's completely fine. Even though the entire third act of the movie was dedicated to Rey continuously making the biggest errors of judgment, at the end she manages to get away with it without a scratch. The same could be said about her arc in The Rise of Skywalker. Rey makes the worst mistakes any protagonist could make, and as always, writers seem to backtrack the moment she comes at least a tiny bit close to being anything but a shiny little teacher's pet.
Chewie's gone.
Oh wait, he's fine, so it's fine. Oh, he's fine. Yeah.
You are repelled.
Well, I mean, she's Rey, so it doesn't really matter, does it? See, in the real world, every single one of our actions, no matter good or bad, have consequences, and our role is to face those consequences and suffer for our mistakes. It's simply how life reacts to us reacting to it. The problem with Rey is that she doesn't do that. She never actually suffers for her foolish and bad actions, which in my opinion is even worse than having no flaws at all. Because a flawless character more often than not is intended to be just that, and that communicates to the viewer right away that the character was never intended to be relatable or attainable for an average human. But Rey's non-consequential actions create further divide between her character and the moviegoer because we do relate to her flaws. However, we do not relate to the effect they have on her story arc or well-being, which is non-existent. The main difference between Luke and Rey is not the lack of made mistakes, it's the lack of consequence. For example, let's compare Luke's character arc in Empire to Rey's arc in The Last Jedi. Both protagonists selfishly and stupidly decide to put themselves in danger in order to help people they have compassion for, and eventually both fail miserably. At the end of the movie, Luke is both emotionally and physically exhausted, he lost his hand, his friend, his lightsaber, and most importantly, he is left to deal with the soul-crushing truth about his father. On the other hand, Rey at the end of The Last Jedi is fine.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year. Michael? Oh, that's funny.
For the past few years, Star Wars fans have gotten a lot of slack for wanting every newly introduced character to be related to someone already known and beloved just for the sake of it. And of course I do believe that there is at least some percentage of them whose intentions were just that. But when it comes to Rey, I can't help but think that the reason why so many fans wanted her to be related to someone else was not just their fanboy fantasies, but was more of a way to compensate for her character's complete and utter lack of both personality and any notable story arc.
When I was doing it, I never felt sure of, playing her, I never felt sure of what was going on. It wasn't like, this is happening and I'm so powerful and look at me go. And essentially, all I found Rey trying to do in the first one was she was trying to do the right thing. Like, she was trying to help BB-8, and then she was trying to help Finn, and now she's trying to help the Resistance.
And this is the part that infuriates me the most, because before this, almost every problem with Rey seemed to be unintentional and somewhat accidental from the writer's part. But from now on, every single issue with Rey I'm going to touch upon was completely avoidable and intentional from the writing perspective. One of the issues being that Rey has no personality. Say whatever you want about the other characters, it's undeniable that they all have their defining quirks. Like, Poe is ambitious, Kylo is angsty, Finn is funny, while Rey is... Again, that makes it really hard for us as viewers to relate or sympathize with her, because there was never really much to relate or sympathize with it to begin with. And of course you have the identity problem, the issue being that Rey never gets to have one. Like, okay now, her lightsaber is actually Anakin's, her ship is really Han's, her powers come from Palpatine, her surname is of Skywalker's. The fact that she keeps jumping back and forth between different surnames and ancestry history doesn't really help the deal either. The more the time passes, the more convinced I become that the people behind this trilogy accidentally wrote a placeholder for self-insertion instead of a character. The writers simply sat down and thought, what would I like to do if I were in the Star Wars universe?
I thought, oh my god, there's a 19-year-old kid out there who doesn't know who the hell Luke Skywalker is necessarily, who doesn't know what's real, what's not, who's just this, like, she doesn't even know she's living in Star Wars. And what happens if that is our, lead character?
So they wrote an empty and colorless character, completely lacking any distinct characteristics, so we can't help but attribute our own qualities to them. The creators of the sequel trilogy sacrificed the option to create an actually complex and interesting protagonist, to create a character straight from the choose-your-own-adventure games. Instead of the actual person, she's just a puppet that is designed to wow the viewers and make it easier for writers to wow them. In conclusion, it is quite clear that whatever happened behind the scenes of this abomination of a trilogy definitely affected a number of characters, including Rey. But in my opinion, no matter the effort, her character was doomed to begin with, since she was never really set up enough to be able to carry the whole damn franchise. Rey's character really is a metaphor for this entire trilogy, of something that very easily could have been something great, but was traded for the purpose of nostalgia, fake wokeness, and, of course,
Money.
Buy our game and fly the Millennium Falcon. Meet your beloved heroes, wield Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber.